weird one for you. Very weird, very creepy for those of you who like creepy, weird, good 4-hour banger that you're just looking to get a little creeped out by and ask a lot of questions. I like that, where you're piecing a puzzle together that's been constructed relatively well. This isn't going to be an S tier, but it's decent. We're going to look at Mouthwash. Mouthwash was sent to me by one of our wonderful viewers who was like, this is really highly rated, you should check it out. And I think for a lot of people, the initial art style, it's in this sort of like 16-bitty style, will be a little off-putting, but it's one of those games that after like 10 minutes, it's similar to Obra Dinn, it just looks normal, and it's not a problem. And I'm going to talk you through this a little bit, because I need to talk about the story just a smidge, but if you're looking for a psychological guessing game where you're kind of playing detective with some twists at the end, this is a game for you. You should go and check it out and then come back and check later here for my discussion on it. So what is Mouthwash? Mouthwash is you are on a spaceship, a freighter, that is carrying the aforementioned Mouthwash across space on a like year and a bit long mission with a little crew. And you're not in hypersleep, although they do have hypersleep pods available, and you're just sort of the crew, very similar to like freighting across the ocean, is you're just keeping things ticking along as you go across. And the opening sequence of the game is you are forced, there's nothing you can do to get out of this, to crash the ship into an asteroid / planet, whatever. An astronomical body is what they call it. And you're trapped in this, and then it gets very weird very quickly. And what the game is a representation of the mind of someone suffering from severe psychosis, is what it is. You are inhabiting the body of someone suffering severe psychosis. However, you do flip between different characters, and via their actions and who you're talking to, you kind of determine who you are at that point in time. Based on that, like your interactions with a certain person are going to be very different than when you're inside somebody else, and that gives you the idea of like, oh, I'm currently playing X. You might be Jimmy or Curly or whatever, and that gives it a weird angle as you're trying to figure out, and what happened here, what led us to a situation where we crashed the ship on purpose and stranded this crew for literally months and months and months. I think it goes up to like 5 months. Now it's presented to you in a non-sequential manner. It doesn't go from crash and then what is the aftermath of that. You go back before the crash. You go back to so you might go back like 20 days before, and then the next one you'll go back like 40 days before, but then you'll go to 3 days before, then you'll go to the day of the crash, and then you'll go to like a month after the crash, then 5 months after, but then you'll go back to 4.5 months after for what led up to what happened at the 5th month, things like that. And as that's going on, you're going to see events unfold, or the results of events that haven't happened yet to you in the game, and then you're going to discover what happened later on. But at the same time, you're going to deal with the fact that this crew has been stranded here. They have food and they have air, but things are getting bad because they're stuck and they're awaiting rescue, and there's things that have gone wrong with the ship. Like a big element is that they have you ever seen Demolition Man? I hope you have. You should go and watch it if you haven't. It's great. Is they have this foam that ejects, emergency foam, that just fills holes immediately, and they're very similar to Prey. And this is what's happened on the ship, because it's crashed. The ship is like filled now with this security foam, which has blocked a lot of the rooms, but you can chip away at it, but chipping away at it is going to maybe like unveil the bit that it was covering, so you have to be very careful, otherwise you're all going to die. So you've got to be very careful doing this, and try and access certain rooms, access certain objects that are in there that might help you, and people behaving in not odd ways, but you can tell very quickly this is a crew of not the brightest sparks. Let's put it that way. Because obviously the company that sent you out there, I think they're called like Moo Moo Travel or something like Moo Moo Freight. Their symbol is this big cow. Doesn't care about you, and this is Mouthwash. So they've just picked whoever the cheapest labor is to fulfill this task, and that's it. right? They've chosen that, like, there's a couple of you who know what you're doing, and then there's like a few of you that are just absolute trash at your jobs, and you're on your merry way. But on top of this, we've got some weird things happening which make you question a lot of the decisions. For example, you decide to keep the person who crashed the ship alive, despite the fact that they have no skin. They have no limbs left to speak of, really. One of the legs is still attached, and they are in perpetual agony for months. They're just strapped to a bed. They can't speak. It's like if you know the history of Metallica's One, you'll know what I'm talking about here. They're in perpetual agony. There's barely any medicine left to even quench the pain they're in, and they're screaming and hollering, and their pain is resounding through the corridors of the ship for months on end, and you're keeping them alive, and you're like, what are we doing here? Like, is this supposed to be our friend? Why are we doing this? And they have some reasoning for doing this, and you're like, this is just terrible, this is awful, and the mental anguish it's causing on the crew to listen to this agonized, hollering, guttural pain that is constantly resonating throughout the ship while still being trapped in this 4 or 5 rooms that you have is awful. And it's a very quick game that goes there. Now, that's the fun side, and you have fun with that. I will say this, though. This is what brought it down a little bit for me towards the end. Once the story sort of culminates into its big crescendo of, like, let's piece all this together, it gets very surreal. In a gross way, right? There is some grossness happening here. It gets very, very surreal. It's not quite me-side, where the surrealness fits the puzzle. This is Psychosis. This is like mental, almost hallucinogenic imagery that's going on that is really disgusting, and you're like, oh my god, this is messed up. Like, there are certain tasks you have to fulfill that are just really, really over the top, but it's still kind of fun. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're fun things that you're like, oh, that's hanging. I will say that they kind of ran into that problem that we had a big issue with in 2022, I think, with a lot of one-day banger games, is that they have a really good concept and, like, the setting and the story is working really well, but they don't really have a great way of tying it all together that makes real sense. There's a lot of leaps in order to get to a conclusion that you should be kind of okay with, but you're going to go, why would we do that? Wait, what are we doing? That's a bit of a leap. Like, that kind of moment will happen. And that's something you need to bear in mind when you're playing these games that are super cheap and well worth the experience, is that sometimes when you get to the end, you're like, it's not the most satisfying of endings that I'm comfortable with. It's fine enough. It's not like horrible, right? It's not like, oh, that's really stupid. It's more a case of, okay, I guess. I wouldn't have made that choice. I'm not sure many people would have. But then you put yourself in the mindset of like, well, this person is clearly like deranged, I guess. And they have been trapped for a really long time. So maybe, you know, that kind of decision-making process is what you go through. But on top of that, that's my main critique. On top of that, there's some very sweet moments that are actually genuinely quite nice, and they come from characters you least expect them of. In particular, there's a character called Swansea, who is like the OG engineer. He's been doing this since, you know, time immemorial. Not only does he have a ridiculously dark revelation that's genuinely really sad, but also kind of makes sense. And that was, I honestly think, out of all the things that are happening with the main characters, this little side story with Swansea was the one that made me go, that is absolutely horrific. But I kind of see where he's coming from. And it's really sad. And I thought that was the most touching moment in the game. And he also has the next most touching moment in his relationship with another character on the ship. And I was like, this is kind of a good person who just also sucks. Which happens, you know, we've all met those people. It's like, this dude is really cool. Except when they're not. And when they're not, it's really bad. But if that's like 5 or 10% of their personality, then they you know, the other good side of them, which is a good 80 to 90% that you see on the regular basis, is actually kind of nice. But you do you do feel for that absolutely devastating, horrible black hole that is the 10% of their personality. And that was the bit that I liked the most. That's my critique, is that stuff was great. And there are things that happen in this game that I'm still not entirely sure on. There was presumptions made by my live audience as to what's happened to a certain character. I did a little Googling afterwards, and it's definitely up in the air as to the exact circumstances, and the developers haven't, like, confirmed what the story is supposed to be that happens with that character. But depending on your mindset and your personality of how you read into things, it's either absolutely horrible or it's like a stupid mistake that they made, and it's led to this kind of scenario. And those are the kind of questions that stay with you. And that's why I wanted to talk about this game, because you do get left with these up in the air questions that are nice, that you're like, I'm thinking about it now. Like, this is a game that lasted 4 hours, and I played it like maybe 3 days ago as of recording this, and I'm still thinking about it. How can I not recommend that, right? I'm still thinking about it, and not in a negative way. Not like, oh, wow, that game sucks. That's not, absolutely not at all what I'm thinking about. I'm more thinking like, huh. Yeah, I wonder what they were going for with that. It could have gone this way, it could have gone that way, but the way they acted in this scene made me think this way, but the way they acted in a different one made me think a different way. All those kind of questions, I think, are good questions to be left with. And that's why I think it's, I would give this a high B. For our 2025 rankings, I think this is a high B that you should probably check out if you have some free time and you like a little bit of grossness and you like a little bit of questions to be figured out, and you're looking for a nice 4 hours at the end of the day to do something a little different from your usual routine of whatever your main game is. So I'd go and check it out on that basis. All right, so Mouthwash, it's on Steam. Bye, guys.